Welcome to another show, another week of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Thanks for tuning in. Got another good show lined up for you today, and I hope you'll think so after seeing it. Joe Mershman is going to join me here in just a moment with the usual Mershman Minute and the show open. Also, David Eicholt, Hawkeye Insider, sports reporter for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and we're going to cover everything with David about that leading up to this week's big game against Penn State in Happy Valley. And hopefully it's not so Happy Valley for them after the Iowa Hawkeyes leave with a victory on Saturday, 2:30 p.m. kick on the Big Ten Network after last week's big victory on national TV Friday night where the Hawkeyes beat the Golden Gophers 35-7. Almost got that shutout, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too as I'm smiling with that, as you viewers know. Also, segment 2, we'll have our buddy James Vandenberg as always joining us. And James, former Hawkeye quarterback, and with RBC Wealth Management Group and CorridorInvestmentGroup.com. James will join us as he does in the second segment, and we'll close out the show with our usual buddy Jeff Horner. Jeff is former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great, and now current head men's basketball coach at Truman State University going into year 3. So we'll catch up with Jeff and talk about some of his recollections of Iowa State games in the past and Iowa's upcoming schedule and what's on tap for Jeff's team for this year. So that being said, I've located Joe Mershman for our Mershman Minute. And first and foremost, as always, Joe, thanks so much for always being a part of this program and anxious to hear your thoughts. So how you doing, my friend?
Doing fine, Dave. I think the game last week showed the potential of what the Hawkeyes have, and it's just like farmers right now who are looking to buy seed and get ready for next year and that potential that they expect to get from that seed.
Yeah, and I got to ask you, when we go into football now, what are some of your thoughts on Iowa's big victory last week against Minnesota and now rolling into Penn State? Give me some of your thoughts, if you would, please.
Well, I've been to Penn State, and I like their ice cream. I don't know if you know it, but they are noted for a pretty decent football team, but they have a creamery there where they milk the cows, and then like a week later it's into ice cream that you can buy, and it's very famous. And if you go to Penn State, you definitely want to partake in the ice cream.
Well, hopefully we're talking about their ice cream after this game this week and not about the football team, because they're 0-4, Iowa going in 2-2. So, Joe, I think you and I are both predicting Hawkeye victories. Am I right on that?
Well, I have an attitude that when you play sports, if you particularly the Hawkeyes, the only reason we play the games is to see how many points we're going to win by. So, yes, I'm predicting a win.
I like the way you think, and I'm in lockstep with you. Joe, thanks so much. We'll catch up with you next week.
Take care.
That's our Mershman Minute. And I've located David Eicholt, HawkeyeInsider.com, via Twitter at David Eicholt. David, let's get to it right away. Spot on predictions again last week against Minnesota. The Hawkeyes' big 35-7 victory. Gloat a little bit. You deserve it. Thanks for joining us as always, and you got to be feeling good. You nailed it again, my friend.
Hey, not too shabby, but, when you look at Minnesota's defense and you look at Tyler Goodson's trajectory, it's not exactly difficult to predict that he's going to have a big day, a career high day, and I think he's putting together a legitimate first or second team all-conference caliber season. I anticipate him continuing that hot stretch. Wish Jameer Smith-Marset had a shot to return for my kickoff return touchdown prediction, but I guess that's what happens when I ends up getting a shutout outside of a garbage time touchdown. Kirk and PJ Fleck were going back and forth, and the most just passive aggressive timeouts I think I've ever seen called in the college football game.
Yeah, but I did like Kirk Ferentz's comments that we decided to take Floyd the Pig with us and leave the timeouts behind. 35-7 Hawkeye victory. A little chippy, like you said at the end, a little gamesmanship, but it worked out well. You're right. Amir Smith-Marset did not get the opportunities to return kickoffs for touchdowns. So you missed on that one, but even though Ibrahim had the yards, the Hawks really kept that defense in check, and you predicted the Hawkeyes would keep the offense in check, and they did. Got turnovers. You mentioned Goodson would get 130 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Gee, you missed on that one. He got 140, so even better. So you actually hit that one. I'm going to give you mass credit on that one. But let's do this. Let's talk about what Kirk Ferentz said today. Full disclosure, viewers, as you know, we record this every Tuesday. It airs on Friday night, and David just got done with a Zoomcast press conference with Kirk Ferentz, he and the rest of the Iowa reporting pool. What was said? Some takeaways, David, please, for today.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, remember, Jack Heflin went out with an elbow injury in that fourth quarter, but Kirk Ferentz said he's fine. He's been practicing all week. He's looking good. And I thought he put together his best performance of the season, really clogging up the interior, making things difficult on Mohamed Ibrahim. So that's a good sign. Jack Campbell, I think, had a great return. He's anticipated to be playing on Saturday as well. I would not get my hopes up about Coy Cronk. He is getting back in the offensive line rotation, but I still think his conditioning's not there. They're slowly working back. Maybe he's a part of the rotation. I don't anticipate him starting, though. And John Wagner, defensive end out of Dowling Catholic, is going to be out this week as well.
Well, and I would say this to you, David, and you mentioned that Kirk Ferentz said this in the presser today that, or on Tuesday, again, when we record this on Tuesday, it airs on Friday, that is not a typical 0-4 team they're facing. Even though it's not going to be a whiteout with all the fans there at Happy Valley, tough place to play, as James Vandenberg is going to tell us about in the next segment. But let's do this. Let's get to your predictions right away. We got about a minute left, so I'm going to let you get to it, please.
Yeah, I think number one, I think Brian Ferentz and Spencer Petras are going to give some more looks to Brandon Smith. Look, Iowa's offense played great last week. I think the passing was iffy, but the run game was spectacular with Mekhi Sargent, Tyler Goodson. Brandon Smith was not targeted at all. That cannot happen. That should be unacceptable. You have one of the most athletic, tough to guard one-on-one receivers in the conference. You got to get him the ball. Number two, I think Iowa comes away with another win. I think they finally get the monkey off their back, which is Penn State. I think that they go out there. I think they beat them 34-17. I think it's pretty handily. I'm not sold on Penn State's run game, and I don't think that right now Penn State has the quarterback talent to be able to make it work. And number three, Tyler Goodson has his third straight 100-yard game, and he's going to get another rushing touchdown. I'm all in on the Goodson train, making something out of nothing, and Iowa's offensive line has been spectacular.
Perfect stopping point right there, David. We'll count on that next week. Thank you so much. Great stuff from you as always. HawkeyeInsider.com, David Eicholt, at David Eicholt via Twitter. David, thanks so much. We'll catch up with you next week, my friend.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Back with more Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara, being joined by two former Hawkeye greats, James Vandenberg, former Hawkeye quarterback, and then Jeff Horner, former Hawkeye basketballer. Back with more in a few moments.
One word means more to farmers than any other: yield. Nobody knows this better than your friend in the field, Mershman Seeds. With industry-leading seed treatments like Trepidity ST, you'll see faster emergence and more bushels per acre. Become a part of the Mershman family and see the difference in your field. Ask your dealer for superiority, Mershman Seeds.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara, and as you can see on the screen, I'm pleased to have my buddy James Vandenberg joining us. James is a former Hawkeye quarterback and now a part of CorridorInvestmentGroup.com or RBC Wealth Management with our good buddy Bill Happel Jr. So you got the quarterback in James Vandenberg, you got the wide receiver in Bill Happel Jr., and they run a very successful business and fantastic job on and off the field. But James, first and foremost, as always, thanks for joining me here at Hawkeye and also our viewers. And secondly, how's everything going with you, man?
Good my way. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Oh, it's always my pleasure, James. I got to ask you directly, instead of just beating around the bush, Hawkeye's big victory, we talked about it in the opening segment. You and I are going to get there, but you see me smiling already. You know where I'm going with this. I talked to you off the air, but you got to enlighten the viewers on your first experience as a visiting team for the Iowa Hawkeyes, not so Happy Valley to Penn State. You were playing back up to Ricky Stanzi, and I'm going to stop right there and let you take over to the story.
Yeah, we were just talking about how, Happy Valley, obviously a very prestigious place to play, and it's a tough place to play, especially on a whiteout type night, which is how my first experience took place, 2009, is that when it was? Yeah, so Claiborne blocked the punt to win the game in the rain, and kind of a sloppy game in the rain that we took over in the fourth quarter, but they're rowdy at Penn State, and we were in the locker room before the game, and basically me and Rick Stanzi, the starter, were sitting there, and you could just hear this guy just screaming, "I'm going to kill you, Stanzi. I'm going to kill you." And I'm this giddy freshman, and I'm just like smiling and looking at Rick and like, "Do you hear this guy?" And this guy just keeps screaming and screaming, and then quarterbacks go out first, and we step out of the locker room, and here comes some crazy guy trying to jump the fence, and the security guards have to grab him. And once again, as a freshman who knows I don't even have to go in, I'm thinking this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And thankfully we came out of there with a victory. And I remember seeing like 40s of Busch Light being thrown on the field as we were leaving. It's a rough place to play, but a great atmosphere. Very hostile, which the visiting team actually kind of sets the stage, which obviously in 2020, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah, 2:30 p.m. Central Time kick on the Big Ten Network. There will be no whiteout. There will be no fans. They're limited, 1,000 or so of families and that type of thing of the players. But I got to ask you this before we move on and talk about the Hawkeyes' current day. Did Ricky Stanzi say anything to you or mention anything? This guy's climbing a chain link fence screaming, "I'm going to kill you," or did he just blow it off and moved on to his game?
So what I remember from it, I'm getting old now, Dave. This is like 13 years ago. I remember in the locker room, me having a lot of fun with it and him looking like a ghost. But then when the guy was actually like attempting to scale the fence, it kind of was happening further enough in front of us to where it was kind of just this big scuffle. So It didn't really cause any imminent threat, but it kind of just set the stage. And they have one of those stadiums where you walk under the stadium and all the fans are against the fence the whole way. So it's like people are reaching through and spitting and yelling and screaming, and it's quite the experience.
Well, I'm glad you shared that with us, and listeners and viewers, now you know that's what it's like to walk into Not So Happy Valley if you're a visiting team. And again, the Hawkeyes won't experience that this week unless the family members of the Penn State players are that boisterous. I don't know. But, James, let's do this. Let's talk about that big victory last week, 35-7 at Minnesota, and much was made after the game about Coach Kirk Ferentz calling timeouts to try to stop Minnesota from scoring at the end of the game, and P.J. Fleck trying to score, and a lot was made about after the game. And I love Kirk Ferentz's comments, James, and I just want your takeaway before we start talking about Spencer Petras and the offense. But I love what Coach Ferentz said when he said, well, we decided to take the Pig, or Floyd of Rosedale, home and leave the timeouts here. Thought that was a great tongue-in-cheek answer, don't you think, James?
Yeah, no, I appreciated the answer. I understand kind of the moment there. I remember when I played, people would get mad at Coach Ferentz for not being rah, rah, rah and jumping up. And I remember Coach Rhodes at Iowa State, jumping and running. And why doesn't Coach Ferentz do that? There's a lot of competitiveness in Coach Ferentz. And I don't know what led up to that, but I did like the exchange. And I think in general, obviously PJ Fleck's done a good job up there, but I think he also talks about how good a job he's done. And I think everybody in the country's heard row the boat from him. So I think there's a little extra incentive when you go up there and make them be quiet, sink the boat, whatever you want to term it. We went up there and obviously dominated the football game, which was the point of going. So I'm happy to see that.
Now, if we're giving out game footballs or game balls after the game in the locker room, obviously the defense is going to get one. Pressure like crazy, nonstop on from all fronts, to the running backs, to quarterback, to our defensive front, our linebackers, the defensive backs, turnovers. But then you got to look at Tyler Goodson, and you talked about this last week, James. The running game, as you so eloquently put it, if you're a quarterback at Iowa, the running game is your friend. And man, was it a friend to Spencer Petras? But let's talk a little bit about the offense with Tyler Goodson, but also the running game in general. And now a lot of people are making much about, Spencer Petras did not have a good game or didn't have a good start. But, James, they're 2-2. They're back in it, in the Big Ten West. You take a look at, they stubbed their toe the first couple games out on the road at Purdue by a 4-point loss when they were ahead, 1-point loss at Kinnick to Northwestern, which, by the way, Wisconsin and Northwestern play this week. So that tie of undefeateds is going to be broken in the Big Ten West this weekend. But just give me your general sense, please, if you would, or your takeaway from the offense this far into the season, especially after this Minnesota game, but also Spencer Petras. You know how difficult it is to play quarterback at Iowa in the Big Ten. Would love your analysis, please.
I think, the offense is coming along exactly how you'd want it to come along. Stumbled out of the gate, not that abnormal. You got a new quarterback in there in the huddle, calling the snap count. Putting people in motion. There's a whole different feeling. And when the guns go off, that can all be a little bit jittery. But I think you've seen 4 weeks in a row now of us just getting better. And obviously the defense is contributing, the special teams are contributing, but I think everybody just needs to realize, at Iowa, we play team football, and that's that. We don't really care if the offense plays terrible. If the defense ends up picking it up and we win 7-6, which we've won a lot like that over the years, we're not biased in that locker room. Obviously, we'd love to throw for 400 yards and rush for 300, but I think the offense is progressing in the right direction, which is all you can ask for. We want to get better every week, and I think they're no doubt doing that. Minnesota is not a bad football team, and we handled them in basically every phase of the game. So we're trending in the right direction. Spencer's going to keep getting better. Is there things he can clean up every week? Absolutely, but he's getting more comfortable, and every week I just have to assume his confidence is building. As that confidence builds, the game will continue to slow down. You'll see just a smoother version of him every week.
So, James, I'll ask you this. Penn State loses to Nebraska. So now Penn State 0-4, the only 0-4 of all 14 Big Ten teams. Nothing against Rutgers, nothing against Michigan State, but you'd think some of those teams would have been 0-4, not Penn State. James Franklin, too good a coach to have this happen. I don't know what's happening there. I'd like your thoughts on that, because Iowa coming in at 2-2. Obviously, it's, as we talked about, at Penn State in Happy Valley. Happy Valley for them, unhappy Valley for the visitors, as we talked about, the visiting team. But what are your thoughts on this game moving in? Again, Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time kick on the Big Ten Network. You've been nailing your picks, and your team analysis is fantastic. And you said, I'm not Nostradamus last week. I got a lot of comments on social media and also on text and phone calls saying, James is wrong. He's actually Nostradamus. You have been nailing your predictions. So I'm leaning heavily on you again this week to make some spot-on predictions, please.
Yeah, I wouldn't have picked Penn State to be 0-4. I know that, but I probably wouldn't have picked Michigan to be 1-3 and Michigan State to be 1-3 as well. So I think 2020, okay, football, non-football, this is a year that has obviously caused a lot of different situations for a lot of different people. And in my personal opinion, I think you're seeing teams that handled this better or worse. Mm-hmm. And the Hawkeyes obviously had more than just COVID going on in 2020. And I think they're just going to keep getting stronger. But I think you've seen some teams that have been knocked off. I mean, who would have thought literally Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan are 2-10, if I'm doing my math correct? I mean, that's not normal on a Big Ten year. So they're talented. They're dangerous. We're going in the right direction, though. I think our group's really tightly knit. And for a Penn State team that's struggling to kind of find whatever it is, you're going against a team that's trending in the right direction. So I don't think this is the week Penn State finds it, and I think we continue to get better. And you want to get better every week, and I think every single week we're watching our team get better. And yeah, you'd like to start 1-0 and then 2-0 and get better from there and go 12-0, but that's not always reality, and we're getting it together. So I'm looking forward to this week, and it's always fun to beat Penn State. So I'll be excited to come away with a W.
I like that prediction. We won't go any deeper than that. I heard what I wanted to hear, so I'm going to leave it right there. James, great stuff from you as always, and I agree with you. I think the Hawkeyes come away with a W, and we'll leave all those predictions and specific analysis to our reporter, Hawkeye Insider David Eicholt, and we leave those more in-depth predictions. But you and I are in lockstep there. James, thank you so much, my friend. We look forward to catching up with you next week. He's James Vandenberg, former Iowa Hawkeye quarterback, again, part of the RBC Wealth Management team with Bill Happel Jr., former Hawkeye receiver. Bill and James are part of that CorridorInvestmentGroup.com. James, thanks so much, my friend. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Dave.
For James Vandenberg, this is Dave O'Hara. We'll be back with more Hawkeye to Jeff Horner, former Hawkeye great basketball player, to close out the show. Back with more in just a few moments.
There is a spot for women in agriculture. There's many places for females, for female farmers. We can do a lot. Over the years, maybe we couldn't have always done everything, but there's lots of places we're finding on our dairy farm especially that females are really good at milking cows. They're really good caretakers. They're good at taking care of animals and observant and detail-oriented, which fits in well on a farm and can make an operation more successful.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. And as you can see, pleased to have my buddy Jeff Horner joining us. Jeff, former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great. Jeff, now the head coach going into year 3 at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. My alma mater, which was so long ago, it was Northeast Missouri State, but Jeff now at Truman State University. And as I mentioned to you last week, and Jeff told you the story, they qualified for nationals last year as a 2nd seed. But as we all know, no March Madness at any level of college basketball. Jeff also, Truman State Bulldogs, finished tied for the conference championship in the regular season at 16-4, and then won the conference tournament in a very tight game, and so they moved on to nationals. But Jeff, first and foremost, as always, thanks for joining us. And secondly, how's everything going with you, my friend?
Thanks for having me. Can't complain. So just getting ready for game week next week, and hopefully everyone can stay healthy, and we'll get into that first game.
Now, your son is healthy, too, off the court. We got to talk about your son real quick, because last week we had the tonsillectomy story, and he got popped in the head at daycare and got more stitches. So he's out of the hospital. He's home safe, I presume safe, in bubble wrap, or how's that working out?
Yeah, he's a little bit like his dad. So he had his tonsils out last Monday, and then got hit in the head with a paperweight and got 7 stitches going to the ER. And so, but he's good to go. He bounced back and went back to daycare today. So I'm happy with that.
Well, your daughter and wife are healthy, right?
Yep, no problems with them.
And you've won the biggest victory of all. We kind of joke a little bit about these little maladies in life, but as you listeners know and viewers, Jeff joined me last year on radio and talked about his, I mentioned it last week as well, his story of being a cancer survivor and a winner over cancer. So congratulations to the biggest victory of all, Jeff. But I want to go back to last year as we talked about with last year's team, before we talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes' upcoming schedule and big games on tap. But I want you to mention, obviously this is going to air on Friday night. We recorded on Tuesday afternoons, but your player from last year, Brodric Thomas, a fantastic player of the year in the conference for GLVC, the Great Lakes Valley Conference, which you play in, but also nationally on all the draft boards and on all the All-American boards, player of the year awards, that type of thing in Division II. I have heard a lot of reports and talked to you on radio yesterday about this. On Monday, you and I did a radio hit, and Brodric may get drafted in Wednesday night's NBA draft. Again, when this airs on TV, the viewers will already know if he did or not, but if he doesn't get drafted, we know how tough that is, Jeff, because there's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft, 60 players, and it's a worldwide draft now. Back in the day, it was more just American players. Now it's all over the world. So you said you received a lot of phone calls from scouts on Brodric, but what are the possibilities of him possibly being one of the top 60 players drafted?
Yeah, I've talked to probably about 15 teams on him now, and I actually ended up just talking to his agent this morning, and he's definitely has the possibility to get drafted in the second round. Now the game's evolved so much in the NBA too as well, with the G League teams kind of, one team is one person's affiliate, that type of thing. As when I played, I think it was close to 10 years ago. I played with Iowa Energy, and their affiliates were the Miami Heat, the Chicago Bulls, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So now you're almost on a one G League team to one NBA team basis, and so they're able to use that quite a bit. And possibly, he's had some guaranteed 2-way contracts. He's had some Exhibit 10 contracts, which means that he plays for the G League team but gets a little bit more money. They can call him up at any time, those types of things. So even if he doesn't get drafted, he's going to have a strong sense of where he's going. Probably right after the draft, but talking to his agent today, there's probably about 3 or 4 teams that I think he has a good chance to possibly get drafted. But you know how that goes. Things change as the draft goes on, and that's just how it is. But he's been doing a good job of staying patient, staying ready, and I think he's just ready to know where he's going to go.
Jeff, as a lot of us have seen over the years, sometimes it's better to be to a select team as a free agent, and you can work it out that way, or as you mentioned, in a development deal. But would it be stepping out of school here if I asked you, can you mention a couple of those teams, or is it just safe not to? Of course I have to ask.
Yeah, it's probably just safe not to. Okay. So I don't want to jinx anyone, but in the same sense, it's 3 teams that definitely, need his position, that type of thing. And one team is loaded full of superstars and may have a chance to win a championship next year, and need some guys that, obviously with Brodric being a rookie, his salary would be, a lot less than a lot of other guys. So, when you have max deals on your team, 2 or 3 max deals on your team, you got to try to kind of find some guys, kind of like what the Lakers did this year, that get cheap guys that know what they're doing and how to play, that type of thing. So he's going to have a chance, and, I just wish all the best for him because he definitely deserves it.
That is great, and it brings great prominence to himself, but also to you and your program. That is awesome. And you and I will talk leading into next week about your upcoming first game. So what I'd like to finish out the segment with you this week on, as much has been made about Iowa basketball, men's basketball, their schedule this year, and the non-conference 7 games leading into the conference schedule. You guys are playing a conference-only schedule, and I know you told me yesterday on radio from my radio show that the GLVC will not have any fans in, so obviously your players and parents are bummed out that they won't get to see their kids play live, and that's understandable, I guess, in this pandemic situation right now. But you've got to share some stories with us. With the Iowa State, we talked about Gonzaga last week. Obviously, they play North Carolina. Iowa does in the Big Ten ACC showdown or classic or shootout. But then we've got other games like Georgia Southern. But I want to highlight Iowa State. And I want you to share with us, if you would, please, some memories that stand out with you, Iowa State games in specific in your career throughout your years there. And again, listeners and viewers, Jeff was the former Hawkeye basketball, one of the leading in all meaningful statistical offensive categories. Jeff's at the top or near the top of all those lists, but Jeff also the MOP, or the most valuable player of the 05-06 Big Ten tournament. Back then it was the most outstanding player, now the MVP again. But Jeff, talk about some of your Iowa State recollections, if you would, please, games against the Cyclones.
Yeah, we my freshman year playing in the NIT, we played at Hilton in Ames, and so we were basically we ended up. I think I hit a three with like 9 or 10 seconds left to put us up like 2 or 3 points, and then we made a free throw at the end to win the game. But after the game, I'm just talking to my parents, and I think my nephew was right around 8 or 9 at the time. He was walking into Hilton, and people knew my dad because he was a high school basketball coach in the state of Iowa for a long time, and so they started yelling stuff at my 8-9-year-old nephew. So it was definitely interesting, but that's one of the stories. And then come to find out later, obviously you hit a three to kind of put a dagger in their heart, I guess you could say. Was definitely a great memory. I think it was my junior year. When we were at Iowa, we ended up beating Iowa State and going through the handshake lines. We got into a little bit with Curtis Stinson and Will Blaylock, those guys, and then I ended up playing with Curtis Stinson later on in the G League for the Iowa Energy, like the last 12 games, and so we kind of talked about that a little bit. But it was all in good fun, and we got the W. But all great games, and it just also kind of stunk that my senior year I didn't get to play against Iowa State because I hurt my knee against UNI, and so that was definitely a tough go. But Iowa State was always definitely circled on your list. People can say what they want. That's just another game, but it's not. It's a rivalry, and everyone loved to play in it.
Yeah, I loved your comment when you said, yeah, everything turned out okay. Well, we won. Of course, when you win, it all turns out okay, doesn't it? I love that story, though. It was Stinson years later. But viewers, if that doesn't get you fired up for Iowa State, I don't know what will. And Jeff, we'll talk to you next week again about your team's upcoming prospects. I know you start your games, as we talked about, right after Thanksgiving. Iowa plays their first game right before Thanksgiving. So much to discuss next week on our Thanksgiving show. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us as always, and I look forward to catching up with you next week, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Jeff. For Jeff Horner, I'm Dave O'Hara, and Jeff joins us again each week. And current Truman State men's head basketball coach, former Iowa Hawkeye great men's player, still a statistical leader in most offensive categories, meaningful categories, and Jeff's either at the top or near the top of that. And again, Jeff, former MVP of the 05-06 Big Ten tournament. Jeff, also former Mr. Iowa basketball. You talked about his dad, Bob, being a longtime legendary coach in the state of Iowa at Mason City High School. So we'll catch up with Jeff next week. That's it for this week's Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you next week. I want to say thank you to Jamie Taylor at Burrow Designs via social media or burrowdesigns.com. Also to Sean Holly, hollyshopformen.com, located in Lindale Mall. Also Trey at trimsbarbershop.com, located in the downtown square of Marion. Also to you, the listeners, thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the information on this program, direct message me, or email me, Dave at daveoharasports.com. We're giving away prize giveaways next week. Once a month, we give away prizes, so be a part of the program. We're interactive here, daveoharasports.com, or via social media at Dave O'Hara Sports. For you, the listeners, thanks to you. Also to my guests, Jeff Horner, James Vandenberg, David Eicholt, and Joe Mershman. That's all from me. Thanks to all of you.
His hands were hard and stained with dirt from breaking ground. If a ship ever comes in, it's coming in.